Every war consists of an endless row of stories. Human stories. Stories of loss and gain, of daring raids and heroic defenses. Stories of shared suffering and happiness. Of highly coordinated operations and slapdash invasions. Stories of brilliant strategic ideas and the bombing of Jade Cove. Of friendships gained and trust lost. This is not one of those. This is a story about numbers. A story that exists in every war but goes largely untold. A story that deserves telling. Here it goes. In the end, there was war. The world was at war, and the world was war. War was all in the end. All things were made because of it, and without it was not anything made that has been made. In it was death, and that death was the death of all mankind. Logi drove in that darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. A part of the war machine that is not overlooked, many people make use of it, but a part that is not in the limelight very often. Anonymity is probably a part of the reason for that. Countless nameless scrappers, producers and drivers contribute to the wealth of a faction by contributing to the public stockpiles. But where the numbers produced and delivered by large clans usually get broadly advertised, the public stockpiles at best get scoffed at for not having the right tools in store. They are, however, part of the backbone of each faction's operations. A more in-depth look at them is well deserved. A method to the madness. For an entire war, War 103, the contents of public stockpiles were tracked. Every day, at roughly the same time of day, screenshots were made of all public stockpile contents. I took care of this on the Warden side and Crowd9er on the Colonial side. Using a slightly modified version of the Foxhole inventory report, original made by GI Code Warrior, modifications made by Dave Sully, these screenshots were then turned into spreadsheets containing all data on the stored supplies. Overall numbers and figures are obtained from foxholestats.com and the wiki over at foxhole.wiki.gg. Using these data, we get the following summary of War 103. War 103 was an odd one with its S-shaped semi-diagonal starting conditions, which, over the course of the war, turned into an east-to-west facing front line. It broke out on the 24th of April 2023 and ended 29 days later on May the 25th with a Warden victory. After nearly a month of gruesome fighting, we ended with a total casualty amount of 2.6 million. These casualties were almost evenly split between the two factions, with each suffering a little over 1.3 million deaths. At the beginning of the war, the Colonials had access to 48 storage depots and seaports, and the Wardens started with access to 46. Not all depots and seaports will have their public stockpiles utilized though, so at day 2 of the war the Colonials had 43 active public stockpiles and the Wardens only had 38. Between day 9 and 10, the Wardens have fully caught up with the Colonials in amounts of public stockpiles and actually lead with 46 stockpiles, where the Colonials only have 44 by now. The Wardens will keep and increase this lead during the remaining 19 days of the war. From day 20 onwards, both factions begin to separate more and more as the Colonials start to lose more depots to the Wardens, culminating in an ending total of 66 public stockpiles for the Wardens and a mere 20 for the Colonials on the last day of the war. In terms of raw volume of supplies, we can take a look at the total amount of crates that both sides had available in their respective public stockpiles. Starting at a total of 7,878 crates of supplies in public stockpiles, the Wardens see the amount of publicly available crates slowly but steadily rise over the course of the war, leveling off around day 17 to a total average of around 26,000 crates available, and seeing a sharp increase after day 25, when captured enemy stockpiles are rebuilt and their contents become available. This peaks on the final day of the war, day 29, with a total amount of 62,538 supply crates being available in the Warden public stockpiles. The Colonials start with 7,313 publicly available crates and keep hovering around an average of 13,000 crates until day 20, when, on day 21, they finally breach the 20,000 publicly available supply crates. On day 25, they once again dip below 20,000 crates, and eventually still have 29,015 crates available near war's end on day 29. Comparing both factions, we can see that there seem to be two breakpoints in the total amount of crates available. One, around day 13, where the Wardens pull slightly ahead of the Colonials, who in turn catch up again around day 21, but have to let go again from day 24 onwards. As we all know, supplies do not deliver themselves to the front line, but luckily there are trucks to be found in public storage as well. On day 2, for both factions, the numbers are pretty low, mostly because the trucks that are in storage from war's start have not been replaced yet. For most of the war, the Colonials hover below an amount of 200 publicly available trucks, with a very obvious mid-war low number of only 79 on day 19. After this, they do however bounce back and end the final 9 days with always more than 200 trucks accessible to the public. The Wardens show a slightly more upward trajectory in public trucks. Starting off at 37 on day 2, they slowly but steadily increase the amount of trucks for the public to use, breaking the 200 available trucks on day 10 to never let it drop down below that number again. With the captured colonial stockpiles opening up, we see that in the 2 final days, the Wardens then also have access to a large contingent of colonial trucks. Looking at the 3-day averages for both factions, we see that the Colonials only keep up until day 10, after which the Wardens will always have more trucks available in public storage. To haul raw resources around for the production of supplies, resource containers are used. Starting at a low amount of 26 resource containers on day 2, the Wardens quickly expand their stockpile of publicly available containers up until day 10, when they have 576 available. From then on, the increase slows down to a total amount of 814 on day 27. And with the captured colonial stockpiles being unlocked in the final 2 days, the amount shoots up in the last 2 days, culminating in 1,265 publicly available resource containers on day 28. For the Colonials, the picture is much the same. Starting at 59 resource containers on day 2, they quickly keep increasing this amount to day 14, where they have 696 available. Between days 15 and 24, the amount slowly increases further to a peak of 941, and, following the fall of several more depots, crashes back to only 402 publicly available resource containers on day 25. After which they never really bounce back and close out the war with 474 publicly available resource containers. To transport crates in bulk, both factions make extensive use of shipping containers. Starting at 129 containers on day 2, the Wardens see their amount of available shipping containers steadily and almost linearly increase over the course of the next 27 days, ending at a whopping 7,648 shipping containers in public storage at war's end. The Colonials followed a near-linearly increasing trend up until the halfway mark of the war, around days 15 and 16. Here, their amount of public containers start to go up and down from day to day, and from day 22 till the end of war will actually go down, and end at only 1,646 available shipping containers at war's end. Containers versus containers. When looking at the combined charts for resource containers and shipping containers, we can clearly see the inherent problem with shipping containers. They mostly provide storage for a one-way trip from a backline depot to a mid- or frontline depot, where they are left in the stockpile, never to be used again. Resource containers, on the other hand, see repeated use in the back and mid lines, where they are stored and reused repeatedly. This is especially clear if we focus on the Warden shipping containers versus the Warden resource containers, where we can see the disparity between the two numbers growing day by day. To drive the shipping and resource containers around on land, both sides have a small fleet of flatbed trucks available to them in public stockpiles. Starting at a measly 4 flatbeds in storage on day 2, the Colonials quickly pick up production and have already 136 available by day 8. From then on, it is a slow but steady increase, with daily up and downs which peak at day 26 with 226 publicly available flatbeds. The Wardens start day 2 with 8 flatbeds in public stockpiles and slowly but surely expand their fleet of flatbeds to 180 on day 27. They end the war with 307 flatbeds in stock, partly due to the opening up of captured colonial stockpiles. The amount of flatbeds available to colonial lodgy drivers is, remarkably, higher for most of the war, with the only exceptions being the last 2 days of the war when the wardens have more in storage, probably because of confiscated colonial stockpiles. To get containers to their destination through the shipping lanes, both factions also keep a small fleet of publicly available freighters. On day 2, warden captains can find 19 freighters in public stockpiles in the various seaports. This number goes up over the course of the war in a nice and even line, and they end the war with 1,182 freighters across all their seaports, both starting ones and captured ones. The colonials start day 2 with 13 freighters and see that number also steadily increase until about day 14, where there are 580 freighters publicly available. From then on, it is a jagged line that somewhat keeps pace with the wardens until day 21, where the amount of public freighters start to drop to only 125 on day 26 and slowly recovers in the last 2 days of the war. With War 103 ending up being a war mostly fought east to west, the amount of available shipping lanes towards the fronts were limited. This probably shows in the amount of freighters available as well. Overall, the colonials had a larger fleet of freighters available until day 21, where the wardens take over and pull ahead significantly. Besides morale, there is one other thing that no warring faction can go without, and that is soldier supplies. With a daily death rate of about 92,000, almost evenly split between the factions, both will need 46,000 shirts on a daily basis just to keep up with the casualties. Since shirts are always needed, the available numbers are pretty erratic throughout the war for both sides. The colonials have 1,819 public shirts available for delivery on day 2, with a peak on day 8 where they have 7,740 shirts, or about 17% of the daily colonial casualty rate in public storage. A second peak occurs at day 21, where they have 10,970 shirts, or about a quarter of the daily casualty rate publicly available. The wardens on day 2 have access to 2,860 shirts in public stockpiles, and have their first peak 1 day later than the colonials on day 9, with 7,280 shirts, or almost 16% of the warden daily casualties. The rest of the war, these numbers are very erratic for the wardens, with a final and clear peak on day 27, with 11,340, or nearly a quarter of the daily casualty rate. Looking at 3-day averages for shirts, we see the wardens increase their stock of shirts way earlier than the colonials, who only catch up after the first week. The colonials start the last week of the conflict with a decidedly larger stockpile of shirts, but see it dwindle quickly towards the final days of the war. Lastly, we will take a look at another indispensable supply, one that is necessary all throughout the world, for building, repairing, and producing: basic materials. On day 2, warden personnel has access to 14,700 BMATs in public stockpiles. On day 5, the number of 50,000 available BMATs is breached. During the rest of the war, the amount of BMATs in public storage will only dip below this number on days 11 and 21. Besides these 2 dips, there are 2 very apparent spikes. One on day 18 with over 330,000 BMATs in public storage, and towards the end of the war, where through days 26, 27 and day 28, the amount climbs and peaks at a final total of 672,400 basic materials that are stored in warden public stockpiles all over the world. The colonials start with 26,900 basic materials publicly accessible on day 2. They breach the 50,000 basic materials in storage on day 6. The availability of basic materials stays inconsistent throughout the rest of the war. Only on day 21 and 22 do the colonials breach the 100,000 publicly available BMATs. After that, the amount drops dramatically to only 20,200 on day 25, presumably because colonial stockpiles are captured by the wardens. Eventually, the colonials will breach the 100,000 public BMATs again on the final day of the war, with 100,700 basic materials in storage. Once again, looking at 3-day averages, we see that both factions keep pace with each other until the latter half of the 3rd week, where the wardens have more BMATs in stock. A lead they massively expand in the last week of the war, no doubt in part thanks to captured colonial stockpiles. As per usual, videos like these are not possible without the help of other people. Obviously, I owe a big hearty thank you to Crowd9er for indulging me and helping me in this endeavor. Providing me with heaps of screenshots every day for a month is no trivial matter, nor is having to wait 1.5 years for the final product to arrive. So, thank you. Then, I owe a big thank you to the original maker of the Foxhole Inventory Report tool, GI Code Warrior, and to Dave Solly for amending it to fit my needs even more. A well-deserved thank you as well to Donatello for providing me the old freighter model. And, last but not least, a big thank you to all the nameless scrappers, producers, and drivers out there, without whom the public stockpiles would not even exist.